afternoon, and welcome to Jeff and the Rabbi. Well, it's been a tough week last week here in America, especially in Baltimore. And I figure we got to talk about that. For those of you who've been hiding under a rock, I'll just give you a little quick update. Riots in the city of Baltimore. Black guy was arrested by, we assume, white cops at the time. Arrested. He dies in police custody. Riots everywhere. It's an old story. I know you think we're just repeating stories here, but it happened again. Now, what kind of gets me a little bit about the story, either we're right now living in one of the most racist countries, and probably the most racist time in our country since Jim Crow, or something else is going on, because every day we see a different story like this. White cops must be just killing black cops, black kids left and right. Problem is, with that theory that we all think now, is statistics show that no, actually, there's very few deaths with cops, with people they're arresting, and the majority of them are with white people, which I know is very, very difficult for most people to believe because that's not what we hear. So then in Baltimore, what happened? We see everybody coming out and rioting, and it does turn out, by the way, there was 3 white cops, 3 black cops, and there's a lot more to the story. The guy was dealing drugs. Everybody knew who he was. But the real question is then what's going on? What's going on in inner cities? What do Detroit, Chicago, and Baltimore all have in common, and why? I mean, one thing they have in common is unfortunately black people living in the city are on the lowest economic ladder in the country, in these cities right now. Why? Now, we obviously know it doesn't have to do with the color of their skin, so there has to be another reason of what's going on here. Who benefits from that? Obviously, somebody must be benefiting from it because they're intentionally held down in this part, in the lower rung of society. The other question would be, what do you do about it? There's got to be an easy solution for this. I mean, if people come to this country, why are these people held down in the bottom of society? Why are they so dependent on government? Someone, again, has to be benefiting from this. I mean, we spend more money in these inner city school systems than anywhere else in the country, but the education is horrible. How could that possibly be? Why do my children, my kids went to a private school since preschool, happened to be a parochial school, a Jewish school, since preschool, and everyone in their entire class graduated and is going to go off to college and got accepted to college. If you take a city school in Baltimore, I'm just guessing, the graduation rate is a lot lower, and the people going to college is a lot lower, and the people graduating college is a lot lower.
Probably depending on the neighborhood. It seems to me that from what I understand, the neighborhood that the mayor of Baltimore grew up in, which is a predominantly black neighborhood, but more affluent.
More affluent, yeah.
And therefore, I bet you that the graduation rates in that neighborhood are probably on par with graduation rates in, cities across the country.
Well, something's going on here then. One thing, I mean, again, I just spitballing here. I like to spitball every once in a while. If my kids could go to private school and grow, I know what everybody's saying, well, you had money, you sent your kids to private school. But wait a minute, we have bills out there for school choice where you could take any one of these kids, Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, this guy Freddie Gray, I think his name, Grays or whatever it is, in Baltimore, and they could have gone to private school. They could have, his school choice. Right now, I believe, probably Baltimore schools are spending probably close to $15,000 per kid to send them to the worst schools in the country, and they're the most expensive. They spend more money than anybody else. But that money, based on bills that have been put forth, that could go to them choosing whatever school they want to go to. So they could have gone to the same school my kids went to.
Right. I've been involved in this, this movement,
right?
To find alternatives. And I think what it comes right down to, the crux of it is that and I think this actually is agreement on this issue. The people who oppose it, the people who are for it, are trying to find an alternative to the public school system.
Right.
The people who oppose these various different measures to try to move money away from the government, give it to the individuals, and let them find their own avenues of education, are against it because it will undermine the public school system.
Well, why would you be against that?
So, and everyone seems to be in agreement, it will undermine the public school system.
I'm with you there.
Right.
I'm pro undermining the public school system.
So here's where the people who are afraid of undermining the public school system believe that once the education falls into the hands of certain parochial interests, then they will educate the public according to their particular parochial interests.
Well,
the
they wouldn't be
Catholic
able to.
Catholics will go Catholic and the Jews will go Jewish and so on and so forth. And instead, they want the society in general to educate all the people, because only society in general will have, in other words, they basically want a vote and a say as to how everyone gets educated. And of course, if you give the individual money, he can take the money to wherever he wants and get the type of education that he particularly wants, but no one else, the society that gave him that money, won't have any say about that education.
They still can have a say, though. There can still be requirements, I would rather by the state than the federal government, of saying, well, you have to have so much arithmetic, you have to have so much, history, you have to have so much whatever. The real issue probably is, number one, I'm sure it's the parochial issue that you're discussing, but the real issue might be that the teachers' unions, who are one of the biggest donators to the Democratic Party, they'd be in a lot of trouble if there was school choice. Because first thing you do, if I'm opening up a school down the road and you're going to give me $15,000 a student, I'm going to hire my own teachers. And I'm going to hire teachers that are good, that care, that only get tenure and can't be fired. And if my teacher's not good or she's not treating the children right, I'm going to fire her and hire another one. So the biggest donator of the Democratic Party is out the door if there's school choice.
That certainly is an angle of it. I still really believe that ultimately, they're afraid to take education away, just like there's certain things, certain social services. I think we all would agree the government is best off running the fire department.
Agreed.
Government is best off providing utilities such as water and things like that,
Absolutely.
maintaining the roads and things like that. Now the question is, when it comes to education, is education like a public utility? And they are afraid of turning it over to, now of course it's run like a public utility, and you know how public utilities are run.
Very efficient.
Right, so that inefficiency seems to be like the hallmark of publicly run utilities. So the question would really be, should we take it away and run it and privatize it? And then if you privatize it, so there's a fear of what will happen, and somehow there's a fear that the wealthy will take advantage of this and the poor will somehow be left behind, or the poor will be influenced by certain parochial interests, and that would not be good.
Well, one of the reasons it would not be good is because if the poor were no longer taken care of by the government, they might not be, believe that their whole lives need to be taken care of by the government. Because right now, you just mentioned that the rich would benefit. Well, they're benefiting right now because they're sending their kids to private school. And everybody knows that if you go to college, you go to a private school, you go to college, you graduate college, the odds of you succeeding in this world are probably triple that of those that don't go to college and don't get out of school. I mean, I've heard some interesting statistics. Number one, in the inner city, just so you know, that if you have this probably won't work too well in the Orthodox community, but if you have a child, either the guy or the girl has a child before the age of 20, and I know that kind of happens in the Orthodox community every once in a while,
yeah.
But if you have a child before the age of 20, the odds of you being in poverty are about 80% for the rest of your life. If you don't have a child before the age of 20, boy or girl, the odds of you being in poverty is about 20%. So it's just the opposite. So there's statistics like that if you go to a private school, parochial school, charter school, wear a uniform, have strict things, have a lot of responsibility, starting to learn that you have to be responsible for your behavior, you might end up doing pretty well. In fact, the reason why I brought up the teachers' unions and the other things and the government intervention in these cities is because the one thing that these three cities have in common, Detroit, Chicago, Baltimore, they're run completely 100% by Democrats, by progressives for the last 50 years. You go into Baltimore right now, there's not a single member in the city council that's not a Democrat. Yeah. There hasn't been a mayor that hasn't been a Democrat since about 1967 or 68. So my point is the party of government, and when you take people and you say, listen, you need to have this, you need government in your lives, you need government for your education, you need government to help you get a job, you need a government in every part to feed you and clothe you, this is what happens in a society. So maybe it's the responsibility society that we're worried about more than just the parochial. I don't know.
Right. Well, there's something that was actually bothering me. There are three segments to this issue. There is one, the community that is feeling oppressed or put upon by the police. That's issue number one. How come we're being downtrodden by the structure, by government or whatever it is? That's one. Number two level is, when you feel like that, do you have the right to, riot or something like that? How does that work? And then number 3, how do people respond to, how does the society respond to the riot? And of course, since I know you brought in the Torah rabbi here.
Yes.
So you want the Torah take on all
Absolutely.
this stuff. Right. So it's really interesting. Here's what I was thinking about with all this rioting going on. So where do we find any place in the Torah or rabbinical writings about rioting? Do Jews riot? If Jews are feeling like that they're dealing with injustice, is rioting the way to go? Do we have a source for that?
I don't know.
Lo and behold, there is a source for this.
Ooh.
There is a source for this, and it's found in the Talmud. And it's found in the Talmud in stories about Jews rioting. And Jews have rioted.
Wow.
Jews have rioted. And
people are really scared when that happens.
Yeah. Yeah, it's absolutely great. It's crazy what's going on there. So when the Jews are rioting, what do? So the example of this is when the Romans were in control of the government, and there's a famous story that the Romans there was an old custom in the Jewish people that when a child was born, they would plant a tree.
Okay.
And when the child would be ready to be married, they'd go back to that tree and they'd cut it down, and they'd make rods for the chuppah poles, the marriage canopy. They'd build the frame of the marriage canopy out of the tree, which is probably by now like about a 20-year-old tree, and they could make like 4 rods out of it, and that was a famous custom, and people would, very treasured custom. It's very touching. Your child is born, you plant the tree, shows you're looking forward to their wedding. You use the tree at the wedding, circle, close. It's a beautiful idea.
I'm gearing up.
Okay.
Yeah.
The Romans were in the country, and there was tremendous tension between the Romans who had occupied the country and the Jews.
Right.
And as you can imagine, occupying forces, and there's always that tension, and occupying armies are not always all that polite, and so there probably was all kinds of tension and issues, and probably some searches and arrests and all the type of stuff that goes along when you've got an occupying force. So what happened was a Roman chariot is driving down the road, and the axle on the chariot broke. They had to repair the axle. So they got off, they looked around, they saw a tree, and they went over to the tree, they cut it down, and they made it into an axle rod for the, chariot. However, that happened to have been the tree that someone had planted for their child's wedding. So the people viewed it as an affront to Jewish custom, tradition, community, and all that, and the people were outraged. The Romans, for their part, it's unclear whether they had any awareness as to what was going on. Basically, they all probably thought, like, I got to get to wherever I'm going. Right. And there's a tree. Now, it's a Jew's tree. Well, who cares it's a Jew's tree? I mean, we're the army, we're the government, we got it. So they just chopped down a tree. They didn't think twice about it. The Jews were outraged, and a confrontation took place. It turned ugly, and a riot broke out. Wow. Riot broke out, and Jews attacked the Roman soldiers. Next thing you know, of course, the reports get back to the base. We're under attack. The citizenry has exploded, and they're attacking and they called out the National Guard and the armed troops. They came out with it, and things escalated. And before you know it, it was a melee, and it was like an out-and-out an insurrection was going on.
Now, did Jews loot when they riot?
So that's an interesting thing here. So let's get to that next question.
Okay, I wasn't sure.
Yeah. So here's the deal. So you see that it seems to be, forget about the question of right or wrong, it just seems to be the natural way that when you oppress people, there is a certain breaking point beyond which people cannot tolerate it. And if they don't feel that they have a means to express themselves and to redress the wrongs, they will just explode. And they will take their anger out on whatever comes to the hand. And in this case, it was some detachment of Romans who were just riding their chariot down the road, but they happen to be the unlucky guys, and that's it. So, but But what happens when they riot? So when you riot, you would think that the anger would be directed against the cause for the riot.
Right.
Now, when I think I and everyone else was watching the video of the guys jumping in and out of the window at the
Right.
CVS or the check cashing place or something like
It's
that.
important stuff.
Yeah, so everyone's got to be left to wonder. Okay, I got it. When they smashed up when they showed that there was a smashed up Baltimore police car on fire. Okay, I got that. If they would march en masse to the police station and all the police would have to cower inside the building and this angry mob and all that, I get that. If they would say no police in our neighborhood and throw the police out, I even got that. Might be a dangerous thing, but I got all that.
Right, makes sense at least.
Right. Now, where does the CVS get into it? Why is looting the CVS particularly, and why is looting altogether? Like, where does looting come from? So this is, well, the people were angry, but the point is that there is no excuse, no possible justification for you might be angry at X, but why does that mean you have the right to hurt Y? If you're angry at the police or at society or whatever it is, but why do you have the right to hurt the lady who runs a beauty parlor?
Right, right.
Now, even if you want to somehow, in some distinct way, say that CVS is like part of the power structure,
right.
Hard to hear that the lady running the beauty parlor, is part of the power structure. So why would the beauty parlor get looted? That's hard to hear. So that leads us to say that there's something else going on here rather than all the pain and the anger of the, So what's happening then, now you've got simple criminalism, and this is what happens. There is a famous statement by the sages in the Pirkei Avot, which we read the Ethics of the Fathers, which is there's a custom to read a chapter. There's 6 chapters. There's a custom during this season to read long Saturday afternoons. On Saturday afternoon, to read one chapter. One of the Mishnahs in that Ethics of the Fathers says we should always pray for the well-being of the government. For were it not for the well-being of the government, people would swallow each other up alive.
Okay.
Which means that the bottom line is law and order has to be imposed from on high. And wherever there is an absence of someone imposing law and order from on high, people will swallow each other up alive.
That's probably true.
And that's exactly what we saw here.
The first night of the riot,
people were swallowing each other up alive. No one was paying any attention to the fact that, well, if we knock out this CVS, then all the people who come in tomorrow to pick up their prescriptions won't get their prescriptions. Right. So what about all of them? People don't care.
Or their paychecks because they work at the CVS
right.
or whatever.
Right. People just do not care. They're swallowing each other up alive. So there might be all kinds of hatred toward the government. And the government might even be overstepping, overreaching its bounds, and even abusing people. Nonetheless, as we see, government and police force exerts an extremely important influence on society because we're to be taken away. And the Mishnah doesn't make any distinctions, Jews or non-Jews. It just says people would swallow each other up alive. As soon as there is a feeling that there's no authority, people go crazy.
And I guess we see that all the time. We'll take it down another direction when you're speaking of Gomer. What does the Torah say and imply about creating an entitlement society? I mean, again, I'm not talking about taking care of people that need taken care of. My worry is in situations like in these cities, like in Baltimore, you have such a prevalent feeling of that. Listen, we need to be taken care of. We need food. We need housing. We need clothing. We need whatever we have. And the people that work, the amount of people that work are very, very low in these little cities, in inner cities like this, because they're getting taken care of. They're going to line up outside the unemployment office. They're going to line up outside the welfare office. When right around that area there are hundreds of jobs that could be taken, but those jobs aren't going to provide them enough money, as much money as they can make from the government. And is it the role and the responsibility of government to do this? Because I think, in my opinion, obviously being anti-progressive, I don't know if you've noticed, is that this is what's causing the situation. This is why these people are almost enslaved in a society right now they can't get out of. Because listen, if you give me everything I need, I'm going to vote for you. I'm going to keep you in power. I'm going to build this corrupt system to where there's not two parties or two different political thought processes allowed in the city because you're taking care of me. Now, in the reverse, what happens is the society, the people who live in the city never move forward. They never grow. What does the Torah say about that?
Well, let's stick with Baltimore. First, I happen to know Baltimore pretty well. I lived there for 7 years. And when I was last there, which was this past November, I went to a museum. I hate to interrupt, but I think the report, I did see 3 of Rabbi Friedman's relatives running down the street with the cases of Manischewitz wine that they eluded. So I just wanted to throw that in here. So you By the way, I'll tell you something I did see. That yesterday I happened to notice a crowd scene. I think someone was speaking. And a bunch of reporters were standing around. Actually, one of them I noticed in the crowd. One of the guys who was holding a microphone was wearing a kippah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I didn't recognize the guy, but anyway.
Back to your story. Sorry to interrupt.
So I went to this museum, and this museum is an inner city museum, very close to where a lot of this action is happening.
Right.
And it was really a museum chronicling the immigrant experience. So that's why we went there, and I was looking at it, and it showed, I went there because all the Jewish immigrants had come through that neighborhood and other immigrant groups, and it was chronicling their whole experience and their talk and how they moved through that neighborhood, moved up and on, and so on and so forth.
Right.
And there was one section which showed that in this area, at a certain point after the Second World War, maybe it was even before the Second World War, but someone got the brilliant idea of raising a number of blocks in this area and building government housing. Nice little, small little neat apartments for people who were poor and didn't have access to resources, and this would provide for them and all that. What happened was the place turned into an infested nest of crime. It became like the city center of crime. And ultimately, they had to raise the whole thing, tear it down, literally to the ground. They show you the pictures before, during, and then after, and they literally tore. First, you got these teeming streets and all these houses close together. Then they show you all these beautiful new apartments, also very close together. And then they show you just empty lots, because they had to tear it down because there was so much crime and it got so out of control. They had to tear it down. Now, why is that? So I believe what happens is that people are influenced by their surroundings. This is also a rule in the Pirkei Avos, Ethics of the Fathers, which is, woe unto a wicked man and woe unto his neighbor. Because if you're living next door to the wicked man, you are going to be influenced by the wicked man. And blessed is a righteous man, blessed is his neighbor, because if you're living next to a righteous man, it's going to elevate you. When you pack a bunch of people in a certain circumstance close together, they feed off of each other. So you're talking about entitlement society and so on and so forth. If you grow up and you don't see anyone moving up and moving out, and you don't see anyone fixing themselves, you don't have any role model to fix yourself. And the more you concentrate like-minded people in the same place, the more it festers. Now, conversely, that's what certain people want to move to, let's say, a neighborhood where everyone's getting up and going to work every day, because when a kid grows up and he sees everyone getting up and going to work, then he gets the idea, oh, that's what you're supposed to do in life. And when you see people moving up and being upwardly mobile, then you get the idea, oh, that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to be upwardly mobile. So really, I don't think the problem is as much the entitlements, because I'm not necessarily opposed to entitlements if someone deserves those entitlements.
I know, I agree.
But what I think is that what we tend to do is we tend to lump all of the people who are in the same boat together. And the reason we lump them together, it just happens naturally because, of course, they're all the poorest people. They can't afford the nicer homes, so they end up sort of like, just sinking down to one spot. Once they're all together, they all reinforce each other. And all the people, therefore, you're going to find the highest concentration of people that have alcoholism, drug problems, and all. You find them all concentrated together. Not because those particular people have more drug problems than any other segment of society, but because people with drug problems will naturally gravitate towards those neighborhoods where they are found with other people that have similar problems, who live on similar handouts, and they have all the services. If you put a homeless shelter in a certain neighborhood, right, that's where all the homeless people are going to show up.
That's how it works.
That's just the way it works. So I would think it's not as much the entitlements, and if it was up to me, then you would want to scatter people around. And the only way really to do this would be to mix people into other neighborhoods, which would mean that you'd have to have mixed income neighborhoods. You'd have to, let's say, reserve a certain amount of lower income housing in somewhere within relative juxtaposition.
Unfortunately, that won't work, because then other people would move out into one.
Right.
Or the easier answer, which I always go back to, is education. The bottom line is, if you took Michael Brown and you took Freddie Grays when they were 5 years old, and you put them in a different school system, and you gave them a chance with more discipline, with maybe a little bit of religion in the school, where we're not so scared of saying, there's right and wrong, and you gave them a chance, and you gave their mother or their father a chance to put their child and give their child in a different situation, in a different environment, then not all, but maybe 30% of those children would make it out of that situation. And then slowly, within a 10-year, 15-year period, you can fix the problem.
Maybe someone should give them a voucher or something that they could take and go to the other school where all the more upwardly mobile kids are, and they could go there. Then they would be influenced by all the rest of them.
The problem, the great idea, the problem is with that voucher idea is you're not going to hear it in that area, because there's not one single politician in that area that believes in that. And it's not because they don't believe in it. It's because they're the teachers' unions and other.
Well, then they would also, they would feel bad if they went to that other school and they saw all the other kids had certain things that they don't have. It would make them feel bad, and
or maybe work harder so they can have it. Just throwing that out there. I don't know.
Right, and then maybe the kids wouldn't understand. And let's say someone is suffering from a parent that has a drug addiction, and then they'd be put in a class with all the other parents don't have drug addictions, and then they would feel bad, and
Well, just one more thing before we run out of time here. All of this experiment has actually happened before, because when my great-grandparents came over, probably when your great-grandparents came over, they were all poor. They were all done exactly like you said. They were stuck in these little communities in New York or wherever with nothing but poverty. But for some reason, 2 or 3 generations later, at least all my friends, most of their they're not still stuck in those areas, and they moved up in society.
However, they all had a certain advantage. They all had an advantage, is that they had role models prior to them that worked for a living. See, they all grew up, and they saw hardworking parents. So therefore, they knew that you got to work hard, and you got to get ahead. That's what
everyone did back then.
Yeah.
And it didn't change till the Great Society in the 60s, but everyone did.
Right. So now we have is a whole cohort of people that don't have any such role model. They wouldn't even understand it. It's totally foreign to them. That's why I believe exposure, breaking up the pockets of people that influence each other, and getting them exposure to other people with a different model for a living life. That would be the key. Okay. That's what I think.
Either that, or let's just blame it's George Bush. It's the easiest thing. It's got to be George Bush.
Right.
That's got to be the problem. That's the easy thing. Well, I mean, Len, it's a sad situation, and I know there's this. And usually, in my mind, the easiest solution, the most simple solution, the simplest solution, is the right one. And we complicate things so much, because I think when we make it more complicated, it can't be done. So you just better keep us in power. It's not that complicated of a solution. People are people.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. In Baltimore, I know I was in touch with people, and there was a big scare. Big scare went through the community, and There are some Jewish neighborhoods that border on primarily black neighborhoods, lower income neighborhoods, and they knew that there was a lot of violence going on just blocks away. And there was, I know of two synagogues particularly that evacuated their Torahs from the buildings because they felt like things might spill over, and you know, yeah.
It's tough. You know, listen, I'm here. I can fix these problems. Just call me if you need it. Get this taken care of. All right. Well, next week hopefully it'll be a calmer week, and you know maybe we'll have something nice and calm and boring to talk about.
Yeah.
See you then.